Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pensive Politics with Mr. Watson. I am most certainly your host, as always, Christian Watson, and today I have Pensive Politics contributor Finn Depencier and Daily Caller reporter, and all-around excellent journalist, in my opinion, Jorge Ventura. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yes, sir.
I have brought both of them on to talk to us about the Portland chaos that's happening over there with the protests and the DHS agencies going around and doing all kinds of stuff and the wall of moms, all this stuff. But first, let me just ask you, Jorge, how are you doing? And how has all of this craziness that is happening in Portland impacted your work recently? How have you seen an uptick in your numbers? Have you learned anything new? What's going on in that respect?
Yeah, so I'm doing good, man. I'm happy to be away from the tear gas a little bit, getting a short break.
Of course.
I think for me, the thing is just seeing, I've been covering protests in Atlanta, Seattle, here, obviously in DC a lot. And I think the biggest difference is just seeing how well organized the protesters are in Portland. They literally have their own kitchen at these protests. They have a medic squad. They have a squad that's out there supplying. They have a squad that uses umbrellas to kind of defend the crowd with tear gas and pepper bullets. So just kind of seeing how well organized is kind of the biggest difference, and also how long they clash with the federal officers. I mean, each night they go to about 4 a.m. So that's been the biggest difference for me. And as in content wise, the numbers are doing really, really well. I think anytime you could be at a place where not too many few reporters are willing to go and kind of be on the ground, your content's always going to be doing good. So I usually try to stay there late at night, try to get you guys, like the full on action from the ground.
Absolutely. And so I have a ton of questions to ask you. I've got a lot of context to establish as well. But I wanted to ask our contributor here, Finn Depencier, who hosts a segment on Pensive Politics called Finn Time every Wednesday. I want to ask him if he would like to ask you any questions first. And
I was really thrilled that you were willing to come on and talk to us, Jorge. I was wondering if you could just give our audience a quick summary of your career, how you became you're a video journalist intern at the Daily Caller. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your history and what ended you up in all these different protest zones?
Well, the funny thing is I started off in sports journalism. So, my dream was my goal was to work either with the Raiders or the Lakers and just kind of be like a beat writer or beat reporter, follow them around. And then in 2016, as you guys could know, we saw that the American trust in media dropped to an all-time low. Obviously, Republicans didn't trust the mainstream media with the coverage with Trump. But one thing that I found very interesting is that the trust on the left was very low as well. I spoke to a lot of Bernie supporters who felt that the Bernie Sanders didn't get the fair amount of coverage with CNN and MSNBC. And the interesting thing was I was never into politics, so I kind of felt like this was a lane that I could kind of attack. I never voted before, so I'm not a Democrat or Republican. And I kind of felt like I could be this new unbiased lane. And so I started off in California. I was attending a community college called College of the Canyons, Cougar News. And I've been just following all the protests in California. So as you guys know, things in California is a real liberal state, so we've been having protests all along. Then with the election year, we've had a lot of candidates come to California. I've been able to interview Andrew Yang, Julian Castro, Marianne Williamson as well. And then unfortunately, we've had a couple of shootings in California as well. I've been able to cover a couple of breaking news stories. We had a shooting at a Thousand Oaks bar that killed 14 people. I was I think the only student reporter at the time covering that. And basically, I've been just kind of building my own brand and covering all these types of stories. And then the opportunity came with the Daily Caller, and it was a right fit right here for me here in DC. And now, and I think the crazy thing too, guys, is I was just supposed to come in, doing regular intern stuff, maybe like interview a congressman here or there here in DC. Then, as you guys know, out of nowhere, these riots kind of just came out of nowhere, and it kind of took the whole news cycle, and we had to all really adapt. And I've been really comfortable on the front lines, due to what I've already been doing in California. I've even done reporting in like Mexico. So I've been really kind of comfortable in having like my life in danger in an odd way. So I've kind of feel like I've been prepared for this moment. And just been kind of all over the country now, Atlanta, New York, Seattle, Portland multiple times, and just kind of seeing, this moment in history and documenting on the front lines. I think it's a very unique opportunity that as an intern I get to be in.
It's an
Yeah,
opportunity that I think you'll be able to recite and recant to your grandkids if you ever have any, or to future generations that
yeah,
want to hear more about your story.
we're certainly living through a moment in history, and I've never felt that so poignantly. Only a couple times in my life, but definitely in these last 4 years, specifically through the protest movement and the coronavirus. So I discovered you through Sagar Anjeti. Am I saying his last name right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I saw he posted. I saw he posted about you, and then I've just been following your coverage of the riots night after night, and it looks just hectic. And I want to ask you: have you been staying safe? Like, I saw that you got tear gas pretty bad. Like, what's it like being a journalist in a conflict zone, and how do you differentiate yourself from the rioters when you're presenting yourself as an undercover agent? I mean, you're dressing like the Antifa protesters to remain, to make sure you don't get beat up by them. So how do you stay safe on the ground?
Yeah, so as soon as the riots actually started off, they started off here in D.C. They got actually pretty hectic, and that's when President Trump, they basically locked down Lafayette Square Park, the park right across the White House. And in my first week of covering this, I actually got shot in the forehead by a rubber bullet.
Oh,
So
boy.
that taught me a lesson. So actually,
Lord
after I got
Jesus.
shot on Instagram Live, and the
Mm,
funny thing
mm, mm,
is my supporters on Instagram are really awesome. Someone DM'd me, was like, "Hey man, I'm sending you a tactical helmet right this second."
mm,
And so I got the helmet, and I think the biggest thing is just kind of adapting to the situation. This is, I think, a situation not a lot of reporters expected to see here in the U.S. First, it started off of me just kind of watching myself with the with officers and stuff, and not being mixed in. That's kind of a hard distinction for them. So I don't blame them for me getting shot. It is what it is. It's kind of in the midst of the moment. But then after that, we had to adapt really quickly, because then after that, Antifa started to hunt us down and actually tried to threaten us reporters on the ground by stealing our phones, or actually just physically harming and assaulting us on the ground. So then it went from, okay, not only do we need protective gear, now we need to go undercover, and now we need to kind of adapt to when we can film, when we can't, and just like how we carry ourselves. So the whole game has just really been adapting to these situations. They're very different. Normally, when I'm reporting on the ground, I love to go live, like to live stream and give my audience kind of like that live feel. That the problem is now with Antifa watching us is that they hunt down our live streams and then kind of hunt down our location. So if I do go live, you'll probably see me going live probably the most, maybe like 10 minutes,
mm.
15 minutes. I don't think I'll even do 15 minutes, but probably 10 minutes the most, just to kind of like keep everything off us. And the whole game has just been, adjusting to the whole situation. And then, here in Portland, the tear gas has been very, I've been tear gas before, but the tear gas in Portland has been very, very strong. So now it's another adjustment. They're firing pepper bullets every night, so it's another adjustment. Like I posted, I think like a week ago, that I got a vest fitted. I just got my gas mask. Literally just came in an hour before talking to you guys. So
Wow.
it's just kind of adjusting to the situation. And I think another hectic thing is, usually, like, let's say you're covering an election or like a campaign, you're able to kind of take a video or a picture, then you're in peace. You're able to tweet it out. You're able to think of how to quote it. These moments are happening right now when we're live tweeting. Like, while we're live tweeting, things are exploding, tear gas, people are yelling at us. And it's kind of just having, you just kind of really have to maintain your composure. And I think that's something I'm kind of been learning myself along this journey.
And so tell me something about, because you mentioned Antifa, you mentioned going undercover, and it just strikes me as so interesting that journalism has taken this new hue. I mean, the journalism of 20 years ago definitely was not this. I mean, the journalism of 20 years ago, the traditional legacy media, which is dying by all standards, which is dying a very painful death because of new media journalists like yourself, thankfully, they would not be going into the midst of these kind of things. And if they were, they would be giving people very snippets and very confined instances of what was happening. We wouldn't get the whole story. When it's live, you can actually see the thing play out interactively. So speaking of that, and speaking of Antifa, what sense do you get about the group? Do you get that it is a disjointed collective of people who are just mad and who are hijacking the term anti-fascist to conduct malevolent actions under the pretense of benevolence, fighting fascism? Or do you think these are true believers who actually do believe in what they are doing and view violence or coercion or aggressiveness as a valid means to fight what they deem to be fascism? And a second part of that question, do you think these Antifa people, from how you've interacted with them, deem everything that they don't like to be fascism, or is there an actual method or an actual consistency to that? So answer that how you want, but I'm just fascinated about the dynamics of this collective, sort of.
Yeah, I think there's it's like a 50-50, I think, for me, that what I've seen so far. What I mean by that is, like, about half of the Antifa group is these individuals who I think are angry and lost, and I think there is something more deep rooted. I think these individuals haven't found purpose in life. I don't know if as a journalist if I could even maybe say that, but that's how I really kind of feel on the ground, is this: these individuals are just mad. And I think what happened with George Floyd, it almost gives them a sense of purpose for the first time. They kind of feel like they're part of something. Everyone's against the cops. It's like a revolution. A lot of these, 9 out of 10 of these people are unemployed, as you guys know, because of the pandemic. But the other half of Antifa, I do believe, they truly believe that they are fighting the system. They feel that they are on the right side of history. And they do feel like, if they have to use violence to accomplish that, they will do that. And I've been just shocked of how they are out there consistently every single night. We're approaching 60 nights. And to me, like I said, I kind of hate to use this term. It feels like a civil war when you're on the ground. So it's these folks really are kind of bringing about it. But I do feel like half of this group are lost individuals that really don't have a sense of purpose. And I think if you really talk to them one-on-one, like for a good 60 minutes, I think they might realize that they don't know what they're maybe fighting for, I think.
They don't want to talk, though. They don't want to talk. They want to destroy, it seems. That's the kicker. Yeah, go ahead.
I found it I definitely agree that it's not a homogenous group, these protesters. I'm sure you saw the video of that massive ex-Navy guy who's just getting absolutely pummeled by the officers, right? They just they hit him with their batons like 5 or 6 times, broke his wrist. And I'm wondering, with the Department of Homeland Security now in the city, local law enforcement no longer have the lead. What has been the progression of violence and the intensity of the riots since the federal government stepped in? Because, it seems like it makes for a much more combustible situation, and protesters aren't just angry about George Floyd anymore. It's a very generalized grievance about police brutality. And the more you increase the presence of a police state, the more people are going to, I think, justly come out to protest against that. And so it creates this vicious sort of positive feedback loop where violence just, it just seems to be inevitably escalating.
Yeah, I think the whole George Floyd thing is almost lost. It truly feels like these people just want a true revolution and overthrow the current system at hand. And it like I keep saying, is they're out there every single night. It's almost like they are against. To be honest, I don't even know what it is that they want anymore. You talk to some folks on the ground. Some folks say, hey, we want, defunding the police. A lot of the folks point to what happened in Seattle. I think Seattle's defunding by a whole 50%. Some folks want that, but that's also a minimal group. You talk to the other folks, and a lot of people want to abolish the whole police. They don't want any police. And then you talk to the other folks, they want to abolish the whole capitalist system. Like, they don't want Democrats. They don't want Republicans. I don't even know what exactly they want. And it's just this. The thing is this whole group is just now mixed, and now the messaging just isn't clear. And I think you also have, obviously, your Black Lives Matter folks who are lost with this Antifa group and who think that Antifa is really on their side when they're they're clearly not. I haven't really seen any black people in an Antifa, to be honest with you. So it's just been a kind of a weird dynamic to see every day. Kind of being on the ground, like I said, it just feels like a lot of these folks are angry, and this is kind of their moment to finally maybe point it at something. I think maybe the pandemic played a huge role with all these people unemployed, and these people don't have anywhere to be the next morning, so they're out there they could be out there again the whole night. And I think the messages just got really lost with this whole situation, and I think they're really losing the ground. Now with federal officers on the ground, we see, the local officials in Oregon, now federal government at odds. And to be honest, guys, I couldn't tell you what way this is going to go in Portland. it's kind of a unique. I think it's, we never seen something like this in American history, definitely in modern day history.
Oh yeah, and even in other cities like Philadelphia, the DA just said if federal officers come into my city and begin arresting people, I will prosecute them. So now you have district attorneys fighting the federal government. It's crazy because the system operates in a sort of matrix that presumes that all governments, local and federal, collaborate together to ensure this concept of public safety. But that matrix is being broken and shattered with all that is happening. So in light of that occurrence, let me ask you this. What is the tension that you have seen between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement in Portland? And do you think that local law enforcement were using tactics that were perhaps less provocative than federal law enforcement seemed to be, or are they basically playing by the same handbook and they're just on a different scale?
Well, to be honest with you guys, as soon as I got to Portland, I haven't really seen any Portland police on the ground. It's been all federal officers. So we haven't. Yeah, I think the only time that I've seen Portland police was maybe on the first night. They, I think around like 3 a.m. when they called for curfew, they kind of did a thing where they kind of pushed the crowd back and kind of ran the crowd out in a way. But either than that, it's been very minimal presence from Portland PD. It's been all federal officers. I haven't seen any Portland police at the federal courthouse at all. I was even reading articles today that about 114 federal officers are in that courthouse. So yeah, fellas, to be honest with you, the Portland police presence has been very minimal. I think like I said, the only time I seen them was around 3 a.m. on my first night when they finally declared a curfew in the city and had to run the whole crowd out. But other than that, it's been only federal officers that I've seen on the ground.
Yeah. And when did you get to Portland? How long have you been?
I think my first night in Portland was July 14th. I got there, guys, the same night that that one of the protesters got shot in the head, either by a canister or I'm still not sure what it was, but it was the one where the guy got shot in the head. I believe his name is Donovan LaBelle, and he ended up being in critical conditions in the hospital.
I think I saw a picture of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to clarify here. Federal law enforcement, the express purpose that was ostensibly stated under President Trump's order synonym there was to protect federal property, which is a legitimate cause. However, it seems to me, from what I have been seeing in the news and from what the empirical evidence is showing, that federal law enforcement have been doing more than simply patrolling federal property and protecting federal property. Have you seen that? Have they been doing more than simply protecting federal property? Have they been actually taking the role that a domestic law enforcement agency would theoretically take in most circumstances?
I haven't seen them take the role of maybe like what the Portland police would do. I think the situation that they're in is kind of a new territory, right? Like we have every single night this huge crowd attacks the federal courthouse. Even that draws out the officers. The officers then fire tear gas, flashbangs, pepper bullets, then clear them out of the park. Even sometimes the federal officers then, due to how big the crowd size is and how late we are in the night, then they do push to downtown Portland streets. That's what we've been kind of seeing every night. It's kind of been the same thing. But I haven't seen them kind of like patrol the streets in a way that Portland PD have been there. Now, obviously we've seen, I know you guys have seen them as well, but we've seen videos on Twitter that has also shown otherwise. But just from what I've seen on the ground, they've been kind of forced to be in this position because the protesters throughout the whole night will literally keep attacking the courthouse. And if these guys don't come out, I mean, they might even burn the whole thing down.
Yeah. Christian makes a very good point. If there's no local law enforcement around, who is enforcing just, normal street crime? I mean, it's just you have a federal government now that's I
don't even mean to cut you off, but that's actually, now that you're mentioning that, one thing that we noticed on the ground while we were reporting is we were literally we walked away like a block or two from the federal courthouse just to kind of like, maybe like, I think it was like to recharge our phones, and we literally ran into a liquor store that was broken into, and there was no response. Like literally, there was no Portland PD. So it's as soon as you mentioned that I forgot about that moment. And that right there was kind of surprising to see. Like this is what's happening here at 1:45 in the morning, and it's just like Portland residents feel like they are unprotected. During these times, it's I mean, it's a big failure from local government.
So it seems to me as if the Portland police are derelicting their duty, and that these elected officials in Oregon don't really have much grounds to complain, since their own law enforcement, which they claim are being usurped by federal law enforcement,
Right.
appear not to be doing their job. This confuses me. This is really confusing. What's going on? This is just really confusing. I swear.
And I just want to add too is Mayor Ted Wheeler has to be on the hottest seats of seats, because the left is not happy with him because they want him to abolish the police. Obviously, he's not going to abolish the whole police. So the left is mad at him. When I'm out there in the protest, they're literally chanting "F Ted Wheeler, F Ted Wheeler." Even the conservatives and just your regular Portland residents are unhappy with Ted Wheeler because they want law and order restored. It's just like on both sides, he's not winning right now.
Yeah, it's a horrible time to be a mayor in one of these cities. I forget what his name, the mayor of Minneapolis, when he got shouted down in that crowd, right? I mean, there's no way to win. And we're just seeing the rapid deterioration of local government power, especially in law enforcement. And just today, President Trump announced Operation Legend, which is just a surge of federal officers into cities like Kansas City and Chicago. And I don't see how the momentum gets stopped here. It is a really, really ominous prospect of every American city turning into some sort of battlefield where you have, these protesters, and then, you have a federal law enforcement presence that we don't know when it's going to leave. So,
and to add on to that, it's not only that, but it seems as if mayors have already preemptively struck at the federal forces that are descending upon their cities and said, listen, if you mess with my citizens, if you do this, we will fight back. I mean, as I said, the DA of Philadelphia already said that. The mayor of Philadelphia is saying that. The mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, she's saying that. I mean, so it seems as if we are coming to one of the ancient impasses of American history: federalism versus, the idea of federalism, states' rights versus the government.
Yep.
I mean, this seems to me like it is surfacing and manifesting in a really grotesque way. And for you to be on the front lines of that, my friend, I mean, you are literally living in a factory almost of history that is creating history.
Yeah, and then one thing we got to remember, guys, too, is this is an election year, So I think that's something that a lot of folks forget, with the pandemic, race rights, lawlessness, restore law and order, everything that's going on. We got to remember this is still an election year. And, as a journalist, I'm very curious of how voters will respond to Trump now sending federal agents into multiple cities and not just Portland.
I thought that, the president has the perfect excuse to crack down on law and order, but of course he didn't. He relinquished his ability to play that card by having his rally in Tulsa. And so, you have both the Republicans and the Democrats not taking the coronavirus seriously now at all. I also wonder how this will play out politically. When Tom Cotton wrote that notorious op-ed for the New York Times, 58% of Americans supported a federal presence. And I was just talking to a woman today on the phone. She has dual citizenship. She lives here in my hometown of Toronto, but she flies to her old home of Pennsylvania every other week. And she's a lifelong Democrat. And now she says, I'm voting Trump.
Wow.
And then you wonder on the flip side, like how many lifelong Republicans who have made their paramount political ideology of small government. Are they like what is going to be the net outcome of voting in terms of federal officers being sent in? Will it help the left? Will it help the right? My guess is that the longing for law and order, I think that's going to get the upper hand here. But President Trump isn't doing too hot in the polls anyway. So,
yeah, this is kind of like a whole unique position to be in. One thing I wanted to mention that I kind of really noticed, which I thought was a big deal, was before the pandemic, if you spoke to Bernie supporters, Bernie voters, they literally would say, I'm not even voting in this next election. Like, there's no point in me even voting for Biden because he doesn't fight for $15, minimum wage, Medicare for all, free college. He doesn't fight for my principles. So it's almost like if I'm just voting in another Republican. But the whole thing flipped with this whole George Floyd thing. Now, when I'm out covering the BLM protest, voters who were going to vote for Bernie are like, oh yeah, we're now voting for Biden because it's like he's not Trump. So I'm also curious to see how that would play out. Is this all these progressive voters who were not even going to participate in the election are now saying, you know what, just because of these whole race riots and where the country's at, we have to vote Biden, and we have no choice. Right. And you can literally tell them, what policies do you support from Biden? They literally couldn't name you one.
Yeah, Biden he's largely irrelevant in this election.
He's an avatar. He's an avatar for a certain party. He's basically he's basically a puppet, essentially. I mean, he even said himself, "I'm a transition president." I mean, yeah, he basically said that. I mean, so the guy is admitting brazenly that he is not going to actually fulfill the duties of the office that he's trying to get elected to. And
he'll still be running campaign ads, showcasing
of course
his history with the Obama administration when running for his second term. I mean,
that's all he has to his name.
It's really it. In terms of left-wing cred, because Obama obviously picked Biden as a counterbalance to his perceived progressive stance, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was entirely a political calculation.
Remarkably conservative senator all throughout his life, yeah.
Absolutely. And so this is it's very interesting that a lot of these so-called progressives are portraying their convictions simply to see a sort of avatar of what they hope to achieve in American politics, get into office when they know damn sure and well that Joe Biden is not going to buckle on some of these very core issues. Joe Biden is not going to push for a $50 minimum wage. He is not going to abolish the police. He is at best one of the last remnants of the old school blue dogs who has been changed and shifted because he is going with the tides of political viability. So I mean, if you look,
he's running to the right of Hillary Clinton.
Precisely.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Who is already considered a neoliberal, in the words of progressive critics, and a sort of proto-crypto capitalist that wants to destroy people. Now, of course, I don't think neoliberalism is a bad thing at all. That's what they say. That's what they say.
Yeah, and honestly, I really wish too that the media would focus, when we talk about the 2020 election, of what a Biden presidency would do with his current history on trade deals and TPP and NAFTA, and Biden has huge responsibility on why our American middle class has been destroyed and our jobs been shipped to China. So I just wish that was more attacked in the mainstream so our boomers could get that.
And he has an endless history of racist comments, and I mean the guy there's so much opposition research to be dug up.
Oh, it's going to be embarrassing, this election.
It already is.
It really already is. I mean, the guy can barely do a press conference for more than 10 minutes. It's terrible.
As a Canadian, we find it very remarkable how long your election seasons are, because our elections, the election season lasts about a month and a half campaigns.
Hey, the media needs to make money, baby. That's how the media makes money.
Yeah, exactly. And with what is, I mean, we have 4 or 5 months until the election now. 4, that's a lot of time in politics. A lot.
Right. Yes.
Yep. Now let me just ask you one more question on my side. Finn might have some more questions, but on my side, I have one more question. These moms, okay, the moms marching in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, forming a shield around the protesters.
Right.
And there was actually this one iconic picture of this lady. She's in the middle of the street. She's naked, and the police are staring at her in the
yeah.
And so, tell me, from what point? I'm not trying not to laugh because this is a serious matter. But when you have a bunch of middle-aged women screaming that their black brothers and sisters are oppressed, and it's just a little bit ridiculous, especially when they're able to stand out there and do those crazy antics, and basically not really get that much blowback beyond scorn on social media. So just tell me, when did the protest evolve to that level?
I think it's just kind of always been there. You're always going to kind of see those type of freaks, I would say, in a sense, right? Come out there naked and stuff. I think for people who maybe haven't visited Portland, just to give them some context, is when people talk about California, they say it's a liberal state and stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's liberal. People want to smoke their pot, and yeah, they want free college, whatever. But when you go to Portland, it's not liberal. It's like far leftist. Like these people are not even like they just don't want Medicare for all. They want to like overthrow the system. So what I'm trying to say here is that type of culture is around the whole city. So you meet, those types of people are all around Portland. And now we've been seeing the Portland moms now come out, kind of forming like a human barricade defense line for the protesters, so then they get tear gas and they get shot. And then now we're seeing a group of what they call Portland dads
with
come
their
out with leaf blowers.
Leaf blowers, yeah.
To fight off the tear gas. So
Portland dads.
Yeah, I just saw this like 30 minutes ago too. It's this is analogous. Sorry, Jorge. This is analogous to tactics used by the Hong Kong protesters. I was just watching a video by the South China Morning Post where they have this thin yellow line. It's the same sort of idea. I mean, it's this neutral buffer zone of people, right? Or this neutral buffer line of people.
Right. I mean, one thing I wanted to at least add for you guys is the energy in Portland has reunited from my first visit to my second. And it just seems that like as of right now, when you guys check the Portland, the Portland protest, it seems like the crowds are actually getting bigger. I was even seeing last night, folks were saying up to 2,000 people were at the federal courthouse. When I got there, it was about, I would say 1,000 folks, and that's still a huge mob at that time. And with how rowdy they are, it feels more than 1,000 people. I'll tell you that much. But so it seems like the momentum is picking up as we approach day 60. I'm very curious if we'll reach 100 days in Portland. I guess we'll all have to wait and find out.
As for all of these people, all these moms and fathers and people who are embodying the sort of archetype of the caretaker, the protector, the strong man or whatever, and who are trying to use that and exert their energy around people who they deem to be fighting for righteous cause, I say this: there is nothing more dangerous than a righteous idiot. I swear. Righteous idiots are the most dangerous kind of species known to man, and they exist in many forms.
What's that Thomas Jefferson quote? A man who knows nothing at all is a man who reads nothing at all is much more ignorant than a man who reads only.
Precisely.
Yeah. I have one more question to ask you, Jorge. What do you think it is about these Northwest Pacific cities like Seattle and Portland that are such a breeding ground for far left activism?
That's a really good question. I think that's something that I've been trying to even find out myself. One thing I know from being on the ground, my very first trip to Portland was actually last year when it was the big Antifa and Proud Boy clash. And
that was huge.
Yeah, and being on the ground there, just talking to local folks, they told me that the very first Antifa group was started in Portland. I don't know what maybe breeds it, but maybe from my perspective, what I've seen is that the law enforcement in Seattle and in Portland is very weak when it comes to combating Antifa or these far leftist groups. I'm from California, so I mean I couldn't even imagine Antifa starting up in LA. I mean LAPD would just run them out of town. And
they sure would.
Yeah, it's the opposite in Seattle and Portland. Is these groups are able to get away with so much. Also, these mayors are very progressive and leftist, and I think that they feel like if they prosecute these guys or if they're too tough with law and order, that they might lose their lose their seat, lose an election with their voters. But that's actually something that I'm trying to understand as well, because I come from California, guys. I'm used to your liberals, your Bernie bros. Free healthcare. You'll run into people that support socialism, democratic socialism, whatever. It's not really the craziest thing. But when you get to Seattle and Portland, these people actually want anarchy and they want to overthrow the government. They don't like I said, guys, they don't want Democrats or Republicans. They want away with the whole capitalist system. And we saw that in CHOP in Seattle. I mean, for that even to happen in the US is shocking. And it went for 2 weeks, and it went for 2 weeks too long because people lost their lives there. So to be honest, I myself have been trying to understand it more of what is it about Seattle and Portland that breeds this type of far leftist movement that we haven't really seen anywhere else in the United
Yeah.
States?
Well, on a cultural level, that's a very open question. That's a very anthropological process we're going to have to go through and try to understand. But on an institutional level, it's very simple. It is complicitness to the ravenous demands of people who have no idea what they're actually talking about, who do not care about the truth, but instead care about instilling their radical political agendas through bludgeons, through the baton, not through the spoken word, not through the written word, but through force. That's what it is. That's what you saw in Seattle. The police chief literally let them take over that district of Seattle and destroy the businesses and set up their little chop. The governor let them. The mayor let them. I mean, it is literally institutional complicitness with chaos that breeds more chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it frustrates me. Because you had people who couldn't get into their homes, couldn't get into their businesses, they lost income. You had there's a class action lawsuit now going on in Seattle because a lot of people were literally shut out of their lives because a bunch of people wanted to make a statement. It's disgusting.
And you know what really makes me angry, Christian, is the fact that it takes American lives to lose their life for a change to happen. It took for two people in Seattle to get killed. Both of those folks were, I believe, under the age of 21. And in Atlanta, too, I was reporting on the lawlessness on University Avenue where that Wendy's was. And it took for an 8-year-old girl to
get shot by those
for them to send national troops. And it just that's one thing that angers me, that it takes people getting shot and killed for them to say, okay, enough is enough. And for me, to be honest with you guys, that's been the question ringing in my head in Portland what is it going to take for this to end? Is someone going to get shot? Is one of these protesters going to bring a gun and shoot a federal officer, or vice versa? I don't know. And I just hate that we have to get to the point where someone has to lose their life, and then the officials want to say, okay, maybe we should do something about it.
Last question from me, and then I'll end it unless Finn has a question. So you mentioned the Proud Boys, and I want to add the Boogaloos and all those other guys on the right. Have you seen any of them get involved in Portland at all? Because they have been around these protests. They have been involved in these protests in other areas. So have you seen any more of the right-wing leaning groups get involved in these protests at all in Portland?
I have not seen anything yet, and I haven't heard any rumors of it yet happening either, which, to be honest, I'm pretty shocked. But I think the Proud Boys, too, they may be trying to really avoid a huge conflict. But when we were in Seattle, it was actually the opposite. The Proud Boys went in there, and I shot that clip of the women who brought the American flag with a black man into CHOP, and their security was Proud Boys. But in terms of Portland, we haven't seen anything yet. We haven't heard anything yet either. So we'll see, and we'll of course keep an eye out for that.
I think these right-wing street protest groups are fading rapidly, and they're kind of just willing to cede that job to law enforcement now, right?
Yep.
I mean, the libertarian right-wing Proud Boys, it's fading very quickly.
It is. All righty. All right, guys, we're coming up on time. Jorge, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Finn,
you
so much for contributing to this. And everyone, thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, I ask you to please stay pensive.